Hello, my name is Olurotimi Osha. I like to talk about American presidents, and today I'm going to be discussing the John S. McCain Strategic Defense Fellowship, my experience in the fellowship, um, and I've tried to make a connection between my work in the DoD and the malicious prosecution that I'm experiencing in Maryland. I was living in Montgomery County, Maryland, and several of the people that I had actually reported for misconduct, were born and raised in Montgomery County, Maryland. Which is kind of bizarre. So, but. Uh, a reason I also want to talk about it is as I talk about American presidents, um, if we recall Chester A. Arthur, he instituted civil service reform because of the corruption of the spoil system and the patronage system in which, the civil service jobs were obtained, by presidential appointments, by patronage, by, just being an acolyte. And the lunatic lawyer Charles Guiteau had actually killed President James Garfield, our 20th president, because he had been denied the appointment that he expected that he'd be given once Garfield became president, and so um, well, Chester A. Arthur, who'd been vice president when he succeeded President Garfield, after Garfield, suffered excruciating pain for about 80 days before dying from the gunshot wounds. Chester A. Arthur would go on and, institute civil service reform to make it merit-based. And there have been several reforms, including there was one by President Carter, I think it was in 1978, and the Civil Service Reform Act. And also that sort of established the Senior Executive Service Program. So the Senior Executive Service, again, at the highest level of the federal U.S. federal civil service, the equivalent of like generals, at least in the DoD. So they're very high. They call them SES. So, in the government, the cabinet, of course, they're the highest government officials. So the senior executive service is just one. They're just below the political appointees, right? The cabinet political appointees. So they're the ones who connect the federal workforce and uh, the cabinet members who are political appointees, and they come and go. So there's that continuity in government. So there are lots of protections in being a federal civil servant, right? Because it's merit based, right? It's merit based to keep it professional. People who are non-probationary, they have tenure, their job, they have property rights to their position. But even anyone who's been hired, if you're career based or uh, you have what's called a you have due process. You can't be fired arbitrarily like you can be done like can happen uh, in the private sector where one's an employee at will. So there's several protections, right? But from my experience, I saw that that was not the case. Again, there's fabrication of records, falsification of records, and there's a lot of illegality that goes on in the federal civil service, at least in the DoD where I worked in the Department of the Navy, and this is illegal. So I'm going to talk about my experience in the federal civil service. When I was released from my second wrongful involuntary commitment by Judge James Bonifant, who had committed fraud upon the court through uh, his falsification of court records, tampering, and making false statements in court, and making falsified documents are libelous. But on June 25, 2025, um, a the psychiatrist who evaluated me again established in writing and told him in court that no, I have no mental illness. I'm competent to stand trial. And so wrongful involuntary commitment is actually a crime, right? So you have recourse. You can sue. You can sue if that's the case. So if you don't want to give your consent, if you give your consent, if you say, well, yeah, you'll go, then it's not wrongful. But if you say you don't want to do this. This is baseless. You don't want to do an evaluation. Then it's a wrongful involuntary commitment, and it's actually a crime, especially if they do it under false pretenses and falsification of records, like which happened to me. Judge Bonifan actually outright fabricated records, and this is a problem in the DMV area, at least that I'm seeing in the Maryland government and the DOD. So I guess that's why they say the Beltway corruption. So 3 weeks after I'm released, around July 16, 2025, around 6:28, I spoke with the Auditor General of the Navy, Donjet L. Gilmore. She's the Auditor General of the Navy, right? So she's a member of the Senior Executive Service. So I spoke with her for about 45 minutes and 34 seconds approximately. This was about 6:28, and she was full of praises for me. And one of the things she said was that I am a man of very high integrity. Now note that she called me a man of very high integrity. Maybe there was something that she knew. I don't know. If I'm a man of very high integrity, why don't I have my job? Why aren't I being paid? She said, oh, she sent me a number of jobs that she doesn't know why I didn't respond. Well, of course, I was locked up, so she should have known. So that's what the state of Maryland has basically done. They've been locking me up, incarcerating me to prevent me from being able to go and work in my federal government job where I actually had um, where I have a property interest. The offer that I accepted was a permanent offer, and then they did some fraudulent things, falsifying records. So they keep doing things a bait and switch. It's a common thing that they do in the Department of Defense and the Department of the Navy, and it's because of their HR people in their human resources division directorate. Many of them commit fraud. They do things that are illegal, that are unethical, and it violates the oath we take. We take an oath to the Constitution, and we're supposed to have integrity, right? So they demonstrate a very serious lack of candor and transparency. But in any event, so the way I was hired as a John S. McCain Strategic Defense Fellow, I'm not going to say how, but I was hired. But I was told I was the number one pick by the person who created the program. And of course, I've mentioned how the John S. McCain Strategic Defense Fellowship, it was created through what's called the National Defense Authorization Act, right? And it's a senior leadership development career track program. It requires you to have a mentor who's a senior executive service, right? And you'll be on that career path, um, or at least a GS 15. GS 15 is the highest GS level. It's just directly under the senior executive service. But the senior executive service, you're required to have a senior executive service as your mentor, and you work with the senior executive service. That's part of the John S. McCain Strategic Defense Fellow. And we're hired as special assistants. So we're special assistants to the office. In my case, I was a special assistant in the Office of the Secretary of Defense. So that's and we're appointed. It's an appointment. It's an appointment level. So I'm not going to go into the details of my work. So I was excited by it. This was during COVID that I was hired, and the application process was really, really long. It takes a very long time for you to be able to, it's a lot of sacrifices because you have to go through a clearance, investigations, all of these things. They make you several offers in it, so it's not one offer. They make you an offer, you accept. They start one investigation, make you another offer. When you clear that, they make you another one. They go through another, so it was just a long, tedious process, right? And so, but before I could start, so I had to be doing take work somewhere else, because I was living in New York at the time that I was hired. So I had to move back to the DMV area because, my job was at the Pentagon. I was where I was going to work at the Pentagon, which is in the DMV area. So I had to look for, another job. Fortunately, I've never had problems, until this, false arrest, which is intended to sort of, cast aspersions on my character or be a stain or create a red flag, right? When they have these false charges of false for 3 years, it's supposed to create a pause so nobody hires you, sort of blackball you because nobody wants to hire somebody that they're seeing assault charges on that might end up being imprisoned if they're convicted or which has been going on. So everybody's just pausing. But prior to that, I never had problems being hired. I was always very, very, very quick. I picked my job. So I moved down to the DMV area, and various there were various contending opportunities. When I got hired, it was funny. Um, I'd started a firm with my friend back in Nigeria, my childhood friend, and we're gonna kick it off. I also had, a magazine I'd started, and we were getting ready, to kick everything off, and I was gonna go back, but COVID was holding me. But I got hired in the McCain Fellowship, the DoD, and so that changed. That sort of changed, and so I focused on working for the U.S. federal government and the Department of Defense, because everybody said, "Wow, this is so great! It's a great opportunity," and that uh, so I moved down to the DMV area, and when I started, it was kind of like really weird. Um, Once I got my clearance, my top secret, the TSSCI clearance, which is it's the highest level of national security clearance in the U.S. government, TSSCI. You remember when they were having the investigations of President Donald Trump in regarding the classified documents, right? One of the reasons that the investigations were slowed down was because they said they were looking for lawyers who had TSSCI. Only people who had TSSCI could look at those records, right? So apart from the president's clearance, of course, that's the president, but TSSCI is the highest level that you'd have. Well, some modalities, maybe some people would do some extra things, but of course, TS means top secret, so that's like very sensitive, high risk, U.S. national security. So I was fortunate. I went through. So it was like a privilege, a real honor for me. So I took it very seriously. Like I normally take everything, what I do, I take it seriously. So there I was working, but it was during COVID, and you know, um, I was hired as a financial analyst. This was what I was supposed to be doing. And, I was told during my interview, I was told that, well, that they would sponsor me for a, they had a government specialized certification in financial management, and they will sponsor me for that. So I thought, okay, you know what? Let me get another notch, you know, under my belt, and it was my investigations, my interview, everything, the process, it coincided my with the bar exam, and I'd already paid for the bar exam, so I couldn't study. I decided to focus on this, on the clearance process, and it's a very gruesome process. Of course, I'm not going to discuss that process. So, one of the things I decided to focus on it, and then so I lost my money, what I'd already bought. I'd invested in for the bar exam to take the bar exam. I just canceled it. So after I graduated from law school, I went back to Columbia University to finish off a degree, and I was doing some other things. That was when I had a project in which I was writing a book. I was writing a number of things, in the magazine I'd started. So I was doing a variety of things. And of course, I was starting my company with my friend. So, which was in Nigeria. But so, and I was going to take the bar exam. But once I got selected for this program. It was a long process, but it coincided, because it was so long, and because it's going on for so long, you don't know if you're going to be selected or not. Because it takes over a year, right? This for me, I think it took almost 2 years, right? It takes such a long time from the application. It's applying for these things is not, you invest so much in it, and so I think that's the other thing that really that it's uh, sort of gores one's ox, when you consider the time, the investment. It's applying for fellowships and things, competitive fellowships. It's very tasking. It takes a lot of time, very demanding. And so the process, like I said, it was so long. I had to move down. I had to borrow money to relocate because by the time you graduate from school, I went to how many schools back to back to back. I think that from the period from 2016 to 2020, I went to four different schools, right? So I was just going to school, so that was a lot. And I wasn't just studying. That was when I started writing, and I was doing a lot of writing at that time. So, not a lot of money that you have, so you're broke by the time you finish school. One of the great benefits of the McCain program for me was they were going to take care of my student loans. So of course that was a no-brainer. They were taking care of my student loans from law school. That was so. So it was that made it very attractive, right? So so eventually started, um, when I started, I I was surprised to find that I was not doing what it was that I was hired to do. And it was very confusing. My experience, the McCain Fellowship says that you're supposed to have a mentor, a senior executive service mentor. You're supposed to have a development plan so that, they give you an additional money, $5,000. You can do whatever, course you want to do, whatever study. I'd actually planned the course I wanted to do at another university, $5,000. I'd already planned to finish up another degree. You see, so I like to improve myself, right? I don't waste my time. You can see, the state of Maryland, where I'm not, I have no great desire for. It's taken 3 years of my life. 3 years. 3 years you can finish. It took 3 years for me to graduate from law school. Law school JD program is 3 years. So you can do a lot in 3 years. You can do three master's degrees in 3 years. You can, career track, how much I would have risen, the loss of income, all the waste, the time away from family. I heard my niece, the last time I saw my niece, one of my nieces, in Canada, I heard, she was, I think last time I saw her, she was 8, and now still she's like already a teenager, 13. I've been missing her birthdays, all the stuff that this racist and judge, this evil judge, and this evil state of Maryland has done. The time I've missed from my mother and my family back home, because I was getting ready to travel home, and they just manufactured this fraudster, this impersonator, Jide Owari, saying he's my family, he's my uncle, and to do this illegal action that they've done. But in any event, so I've missed all of that time, and you know, want to invest so much. If you want to be part of the McCain Fellowship, it takes a lot. So I invested a lot into the program, but it was all well and good because again, you get all these. You have to get all these recommendations from your schools, all of that stuff from professors. Get all your transcripts. It costs money to be able to get transcripts. I was very lucky. I was able to get all these things ready. Um, but so it's it it was a lot of sacrifice, and then for me, I lost my money because I had, last minute I just canceled it. I canceled taking the bar because it coincided with the time my investigations was on, and I just had to devote. Everybody said, look, especially since I'd been offered the job already, and it was a great program. And then I learned that I was the number one pick, and it was, so it blew my mind. I was like, okay, then I should do this. By the way, the person who picked me, the creator of the program, wasn't a black person. It wasn't a black woman, not a black man. It was a white guy, right? So um, when I say there's racism in America, It's not that I don't understand that there are a lot of people who are not racist, right? If you look at the John S. McCain Strategic Defense Fellowship, this current cohort, maybe cohort five, you see there's not a single black person there, not a single Asian. They're all whites, right? And in my cohort, I was the number one pick. They don't tell you your pick, but this person just let me know because my clearance was taking so long, and it was a lot of sacrifice. It was during COVID, and for me, there was so much opportunity cost, right? Because if you don't get your clearance, that's it. You can't do anything. So you need your clearance first. Um, and the guy let me know that look, I was the number one pick. So that sort of boosted me again. That okay, wow, okay, let me just chill. Let me be patient, and I was patient. So and then, but when I now started, I found out that the position I was supposed to be doing, I was supposed to be working as a financial analyst, right? Supposed to be doing high level financial analyst work. I was supposed to be supporting the undersecretary of defense. That's a CFO, the chief financial officer of the Department of Defense. Is one of the top people, right? That was who I was supposed to be supporting. And finance, you do finance work. When I started, I saw that was not what was going on. And I took time, I went to go and read everything about the program. So I read the modalities, the things we're supposed to do. That's who I am, right? I went to research, did everything, read it. I'm saying that, well, okay, the things that were promised, that's not what I'm experiencing. I didn't have, you know, I was supposed to be working with a senior executive service instead of, or at least a GS15. But they now paired me, the person I worked with, the first person and the only person I worked with was a GS14. She just became GS14. She just joined the department from another, she was new to the DOD. She transferred from, Department of Transportation. Just transferred just like a month, less barely 3 months before me. So she didn't know anything. She was just learning herself. She didn't know anything, and she was a GS14. That's okay. I'm a team player. I'm somebody who focuses on the goal. But this person was a nightmare. I've never met somebody so incompetent and so evil. This person was toxic. I've never, and it was weird. And she was arrogant. Not just that, but she was racist. And I was like wondering, okay, did they give me a racist person just to? It was just us working, and not just that, but she was also now making um, um, unwanted flirtations, right? Unwanted sexual advances. And, it made me uncomfortable. I was telling my friend about it. I look, what's going on? My friend eventually tells me, you know what, turn off your camera. So I was allowed to work remotely because it was COVID. Although I had a, place to work at the Pentagon, but, I was allowed to work remotely. If I wanted to go, I could go. I didn't have to go. And unfortunate for me, I now caught COVID. And I'm going to tell the story of how I caught COVID. So it was a nightmare. I loved the research. I was doing research. I'm somebody who loves learning, but I was working with somebody who had graphic arts design, right? Graphic arts design instead of finance. Didn't know what she was saying. Didn't know what, I mean, she didn't know what she was saying. She didn't know what she was doing. She didn't know anything, and I wasn't doing what I was supposed to do. And I was trying to inquire, find out that okay, what's going on? Because I graduated from law school. I'm an accountant. I've been a banker. I understand contracts, right? So there's a meeting of the minds. It's not just somebody making me an offer, right? I have to know what it is I'm accepting, and I accept. You just don't just surprise somebody, say, okay, hey, you're buying, because when you're getting hired and you're accepting employment, it's like you're going to buy something, right? So you don't see a display of a bottle, and then you buy the bottle, and then you think you're paying for the bottle, and then when it's time for you to go, receive your item, your purchase from the cashier, they give you a bowl instead. It doesn't work that way. It's actually against the law, against contract law. It's a fraudulent thing. It's called bait and switch, right? And I learned this, being a banker, stockbroker. These are things that are illegal. I learned it in law school as well. So that's bait and switch. So you offer me something, I've accepted, I've made the sacrifice, I've given consideration, and then you give me something else instead. That, oh, this is what you really got. So that was one of the challenges I was having. Plus, I was now being given somebody that was, my God, suffering, painfully, painfully racist against Black people, and it was very concerning. Apart from that, the person was now making unwanted sexual advances. That I had to tell my friend. My friend said, "Look, stop using your camera." So I had to make a request because we were working remotely, and so there was a backlash to that, and I'm going to discuss that. My name is Olurotimi Osha. I'll keep you posted. So I'll call this the first part of my John S. McCain Strategic Defense Fellowship experience.